So again, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sébastien Meunier. I'm the platform evangelist and also a customer success manager for Intuiface. I will present you today this webinar about how to connect your Intuiface experience to external data using Excel and APIs. Why are we going to talk about these things? You will see that using an Excel file can be really helpful when you want to create complex experiences or experiences that will take benefits of the data sources you may have behind. We will see first some samples that you will be able to find in the marketplace and all the concepts which are involved. I will assume today that most of you are familiar with Intuiface and have maybe at least watched the Introduction to Intuiface webinar. If it's not the case, don't worry, you can still stay with me today and I will make sure that you get all these new concepts. Then we have a look at two real cases. The first one, how to load external data and create a demo around that. First using an Excel file, then using some web services. And second main scenario, that's the opposite, how to create a form and retrieve user information from the screen and log this information. So first, these sample experiences you can find in our marketplace. All of these are for free, so you can download them, see how we built them, and they can give you some examples. By the way, you see this carousel here? This one is populated by an Excel file, which means I wrote a list of samples I wanted to present you, like this photo exhibition one or restaurant menu. And I can already apply some filters on this data source. If I click on this button here, use Excel file, you see I have less samples than before, okay? And actually I still have the photo exhibition. That's the one we're going to use today as the sample data source. If I check these uses web services, now I only have 3 of them remaining. Like for example, this Zoopla real estate is using the Zoopla web services from the UK. And I can clear my filters and find again my complete list of data. So this is the kind of thing you can build in a couple of minutes using a data source. Now let's go directly into the concepts. So we'll go back to edit mode and start talking a little bit about the concepts we are going to use today. Before I forget, just a reminder, file menu, show experiences panel. You will find in the marketplace tab all the samples I was mentioning earlier. So check them, download them, play them, see how they were built. They can be a good inspiration for you. As I said, I will assume you're a bit familiar with the tool and with the main workspace, so I won't talk about assets, collections, content library, or properties and triggers and actions. Okay. Today we are going to focus on this maybe new panel for you, the interface assets. We could have named them plugins. These are components that will let you connect your interface experience to the outside world. It can be to load data, to write data, to add some business logic. It has lots of different purposes. If I click on this Add an Interface Asset button, you will see that I can access lists. These are what we call the off-the-shelf interface assets, all the ones we are providing with Intuiface. Among them, and these are the ones we are going to use today, how to create your own interface assets using an Excel file or using our API Explorer to connect a web API, some web services. In addition to these two things, you can also create your own interface asset if you're a developer using either a piece of .NET, C# or VB if you plan to run on a Windows environment, or some JavaScript that would run on all the platforms we support. And in this list, you will also find some pre-developed interface assets that we created for you. And there are very various things here. You can use beacons. You can use some information from the device, like its IP address or its location based on the IP address. You can use external triggers, local or coming from the web. This is a brand new feature we added in May of this year. And you can also access some more business logic oriented things, like how to send some emails, how to create a shopping list, how to count things using, where's my counter? My counter is here. So all these little components, plugins, interface assets, as we name them, can help you add some logic into your experience. Once you have added an interface asset to your experience, like this one here, that's the samples Excel file I used in my previous scene. It belongs to the entire experience, not to a specific scene, which means the content will be available in all the scenes at any time. That's the main difference between an interface asset and an asset that will be in the scene structure. Next concept, the X-ray panel. This is the little button you have here on your interface asset. If I open this one, this new panel will let you discover all the properties, triggers, and actions of the interface asset you added to your experience. This is an Excel file, and if I do a right-click, edit in Excel, it's going to open the file so we can compare the things side by side. So let's open Excel. Let me put this one on the right side. So this is my Excel file. You can see it has 4 columns with the column titles in the first row. Sample name, thumbnail, uses Excel, uses web services. And these 4 titles are available here. They become properties in the Intuiface world, which is, by the way, the only rule you need to follow to be able to use an Excel file within Intuiface as a data source. The first row contains the column titles, then each row corresponds to one item in your data source. In addition to these dynamic properties that will depend on your Excel file, you will also find the number of rows. So we have 10 rows here from number 2 to number 11, and the file path, which is the location of this Excel file. As soon as you import an Excel file within an experience, you will find it inside the experience folders, which means everything will be packed within your experience when you publish it in the cloud and when you deploy it on the player. That's one of the advantages of using an Excel file. Everything will be local. And if we have a look at this X-ray panel, you will see that we don't have any triggers on an Excel file, but we do have some actions, and we are going to use these ones later in the webinar. Okay, so that's an interface asset, that's cool, but I don't see anything in my scene, right? So what happens if I just drag and drop this samples object here in the scene, right? This creates a default visual representation of the data which is contained in the Excel file. Remember, we had 4 columns. You will see that here in this group, which we will call a template, we have 4 assets, 3 texts and 1 image, since we had something which looked like an image path. If I edit this template, see how it edits all the items in my collection. By default, you have an asset grid collection. Of course, this is a collection as the ones you've been using so far, so you can change this one into another kind of collection, an asset flow, for example. Now, how does it work? Why do I see different images here, although I have only 1 group and 1 image asset? This is done thanks to the binding. That's the third concept. This little bullet point that you see here on the right side, this is a binding, which was automatically created when I did the drag and drop of the sample subject in my scene. Now, how do you create these bindings from scratch? Let me grab an image asset. Okay, that's the classic one. Usually when you want to set up an image, you will either double click and choose among the content library or browse to your drive. Or from the properties panel, you would browse the same list. Okay. Now, as soon as I put my mouse over a property, you see the same bullet point here, get value from. This is how you create a binding. So for this image property, I want to get the value from somewhere else. In the source, I can select either a source from the scene structure or from my interface assets. This is my Excel file. And now I can access my properties from Excel. Thumbnail, that's the thumbnail associated to the first item. I can, by the way, test different rows, since here I'm not in a collection. Okay. Let's update a little bit this template, right? We said that uses Excel, uses web services. These are values we used to create the filters, but we can also use them to maybe display an icon, right? If we have an image like an Excel icon logo, I can add to this template. So let me delete these two texts, maybe center my title, and I will add this Excel icon that I prepared. Okay, I will put this one here. And now let's say that this icon, I want it to be only visible if the show Excel, what was the name again? If the uses Excel value is true, this is a Boolean value, right? True or false. So I want this thing to be visible or not based on the value coming from my data source, uses Excel. So that's another kind of binding, right? You don't have to bind a text to a text value as we did for the title, or an image path to an image. You can bind any property of an asset to any property of another asset or a property of an interface asset. Now, if we just hit play and test that, just to check that this binding is working. So all these ones are using Excel, that's true. This one is not, that's true. This one is using a web service, so we don't have the icon visible. Same for the local attractions. We don't have any Excel icon here. So that's another kind of usage for the binding. And we'll see lots of different examples in the next scenes. Last concept, totally optional, but can be useful sometimes, is the value converter. See this title here? It was written with only the first letter uppercase. Maybe I want something which looks more like a title without having to change the database. In this case, I have an Excel file, so I could go in the database and change the data. But maybe if I'm using a web service, or if I'm not an admin, I don't have access to the database and I can't change this data. So as soon, as soon as you have created a binding, on top of it, you have a little button here, add a converter. This will let you add a converter between the input, the data coming, in this case, from the Excel file, and the result, which is what will be displayed on screen. We are talking about a text here. Let's go to an uppercase, for example. You see that this converter now applies to all the titles, all the sample names in this template, in this collection. Again, we'll see some concrete examples in the next scenes. So, interface assets, which are also using properties, triggers, and actions, as usual. This X-ray panel, which is pretty useful to see what is available. The binding that creates the link between the view, the front end, and the back end, we could say. And the value converter, which can be used to transform this data before presenting it to the user. That's it. So now we know how it works. Let's go to some concrete examples. And I will start with this local Excel file. Okay. So let's have a look at this Excel file, which I prepared for the webinar. Okay, that's the one. As I said, I'm going to use the photo exhibition sample. Let me make this bigger, make sure that you see it correctly. Okay, so we have two tabs, a list of collections. We have 3 collections for this art gallery: vintage cars, African wildlife, and beautiful Thailand. And we have the list of pictures. Again, one and only rule to follow. First row contains the column titles. That's the only thing you need to remember to use an Excel file within Intuiface. Then if we have a look at these columns, you will see that we have some file path to the pictures we're going to display on the screen and some characteristics. Each picture has a name, was made by an artist at a certain date, it has a description, a price, and it belongs to a collection. This is how we will apply some filters. As you would do in Excel, data filter, we could say I want to see only the pictures which has the collection field equal to vintage cars, and then it would filter the list. So this behavior that is available in Excel, we can reproduce the exact same one within Intuiface using actions. By the way, you saw that the image path was gallery-photos/something. Here are all the pictures I'm planning to use. You could use HTTP links, web links. Again, the advantage of having local content is that as soon as I have published and deployed my project on a player, it can be a wall, a tablet, whatever, the content will be available offline. Okay, let's drag and drop this Excel file and the folder in the scene, and let's see what we have. So basically, this created 2 lists, one per tab in my Excel file, the collections and the photo list. Let's put the collections on the side. We will use this one a bit later. And let's focus on the list of pictures. Okay, so in this template, you can see all the columns which were represented with an asset, mainly text assets, except for the photo location, where Intuiface guessed, hey, this looks like an image, let me put an image asset and pre-bind the image property to this photo location column so that you see something on screen. Okay, I will update this template. Actually, I'm just going to keep the 2 main ones. So I'm deleting these ones, reducing a bit the size. Let's go with a center text. Maybe I will update this one here. And yeah, let's go with something like that. By the way, we wanted to display them as a grid. So let's play with this collection and say this will be a 2 rows horizontal grid. Okay, sounds good. Just for the webinar recording, I will remove the initial scroll effect. Okay, done. You can have 10 pictures, 20 pictures, or 50 pictures. It works the same way. You just need to go in your Excel file, add the entries, and then everything will be loaded on the right side of this collection. Okay, so that was step number 1, just a few seconds. Step number 2, we want to display more information about one photo in a pop-up. So all this information, which are in the additional columns, let's display them in this pop-up, which I prepared in advance, right? And which will, let's say, come here on top of the screen. By the way, let me put this one in another layer. Okay, so it's really on top. Like this. This will be opened and filled with the right information on demand. So let me do this. We are going to use triggers and actions. So basically, the trigger is when a user is going to tap one of these pictures. So let's add a trigger. Touch is tapped, perfect. Then I need to fill the different placeholders I have in my pop-up. So let me start with the image. This image, which contains one sample image just for the illustration of the pop-up. Again, instead of browsing my content library, I can create a binding here as well on an action parameter. And I can retrieve the information from my current data feed. which will be photo location. Okay. Let me do the same thing with the texts. So this artwork name, I will retrieve the artwork name. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 additional texts. So let me duplicate this action. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a bit faster to create. So the description placeholder will grab the description column. The artist will use the artist column. The price will use the price. And last one, the creation date, we'll pick the creation date. Okay, so all the placeholders are filled. Now I just need one last action, which is to move the pop-up in the scene. So let's move this one somewhere around here, maybe. Okay. Notice that this trigger has been added to the template, the root object within this data feed. If I select another one, that's the same object in my scene structure, and the same trigger will apply to all the items within this collection. So let me save the project and hit play to test that. Okay, so right now I have my list of content. I can scroll the list. If I click on the yellow one here, sunshine in the field, you can see I get this pop-up with the right title. Seems to be the right description. That we have a date, a name, and a price. I can close this one and just select another one, the BL Comics, and we have the updated information. By the way, I don't even have to close it. I can just click behind, and you see that the content is updated automatically. Again, works for 5 items or 20 items. You just need to do it once, thanks to the template mechanism, to the fact that every item is represented with this template, thus have this trigger applied on it. So that was step number 2. Step number 3, we will add some filters. So let me just hide this text to get some room. And now I can use my collections here. So as I mentioned earlier, on these Excel files, we have some actions available, including adding filters. This is the action we are going to call as soon as a user clicks on one of these collections. So again, let's update a little bit the template. I will keep something like this, using the group as a clipping mask, so it looks like a button. In a real design, I would use real buttons with released state and pressed state, but I don't have the graphic design available, so let's go with a basic image. I will just remove the controls. Okay, so same ID on this template on each of these buttons, but I only need to do it once. I will add a trigger. So when this collection item is tapped, then we will call an action, not on the photo list, not on the asset grid, right? This is just a visual representation, but on the interface asset, on the data source itself. On this Excel file, we will add a filter. And we want to display all the items where the column collection, the value in this column is equal to, in my current data feed, which is my collections, the name of the collection I just clicked. So if I click on the vintage cars, it will use the vintage cars as the parameter for this filter. So one trigger, one filter action, and it works for the 3 buttons. So right now, if I scroll, you can see I have the animals and the Thailand pictures. See that? If I click on vintage cars, now I have only the cars available. If I click on the wildlife, I will see only the animals, and same for the beautiful Thailand. Okay, and of course, the trigger still works and we still see the details of each picture. With such an Excel file, you can create a product catalog in just a few minutes. As soon as you have the right Excel structure and you know how to use the filters within Intuiface, the filtering actions, you're good to go. And it will save you a huge amount of time instead of creating lots and lots of copy and paste of the pop-up with the details and doing hide and show manually. So as soon as you have some content which has the same structure, which looks like duplicates, think about gathering this content into an Excel file and using this template mechanism. Okay, so that was how to load external data using an Excel file. Let's see another example using a web service, and this, I guess, will answer Eric's question. Actually, the next one will a bit more. So I'm going to add a new interface asset. This time, instead of using an Excel file, I will use the API Explorer. This new window which pops up will let you access an API, web services, without having to write any line of code. The only thing you need to know is what is the URL to your API, right? The first time you open this one, you will be driven through a tutorial, step-by-step tutorial, and which will explain you all the different phases. So I really encourage you just to open this one and follow the tutorial steps. Right now, I don't have any URL to demonstrate, so let's have a look at the examples that we provide. So these are some examples of APIs we've been using. An RSS feed, for example, the Intulab blog, that's one of them. Some news, some weather APIs, like the one we provide directly among the off-the-shelf interface assets. Airtable, and we will use this one pretty soon. WordPress is a perfect CMS, right? And right now, I would like to use the Zoopla. That's the real estate one I was mentioning earlier in this webinar. So let's have a look at this. So now this is the view where you will see the requests, and on the left side, all the request parameters. On the right side, the result. We have some videos and articles explaining in details all the things you can do here with the API Explorer, right? In the webinar, I will show you the main aspects. So the first thing is that on the left side, you have the parameters which are part of the URL here. This is a get web service. Could be post, put, patch, delete. And if I change a property, for example, minimum price, if I go to 350 and hit enter, it will refresh the results. And this is the kind of thing you will be able to do in real time within an experience. So let's say I'm good with my parameters. Now I can focus on my result and pre-select the information that I want to display in my experience. By the way, it looks like some have been pre-selected by the API Explorer. We do have some machine learning behind the scene, which tries to analyze the different fields and we propose the most relevant ones. In this case, it selected the description, a short description. I will keep only the short one, the price, the address. I don't care about the floor plan, but I do care about the image URL. And I don't care about this one. Sounds good. Actually, I will even remove the short description just to show a small template within the list. And just to make sure that we don't have any issue later, I will remove this property, which should be a number. Okay, so once you're done, when you have selected these properties you want to display, you can import this. You can name this one Zoopla listing and say create. Now, what do we have? Well, if we compare to what we had with Excel, it's pretty similar, right? Except that the data is coming from the web and not from a local Excel file. It created automatically an asset grid, again, the default kind of collection, with a default template, a group with 2 texts and 1 image. By the way, if we look at this price, this definitely doesn't look like a price, right? And that's the opportunity to use a value converter. So I can go here and add a converter on this binding. We are talking about a number, and I can format this number. So I would say I want a currency symbol, some thousand separators, and this is a UK web service, so I need a UK pound sign. That's the way I want to present my price. And I will align this to the right with a little offset. By the way, I could also add maybe a little background to this template. Let's use a basic rectangle like this. Okay, I want something white with a little outline like this, and send to back. Okay, this looks like a house listing now. Again, you could change this asset grid to an asset flow. I will personally change it to a vertical asset grid so we can put it here on the right side of our UI. Okay, that was actually the step number 2, how to display this listing as a list. I don't know if you've seen, but among the results, if we have a look here at the X-ray panel, among the properties, the read-only properties, here I will see only the 3 ones that I selected first in the API Explorer. If I uncheck this, I will see all the properties which are returned by the web service. And you will see we have many more, including some latitude and longitude information. That's the opportunity to display this result list on a map. If we add a map here, okay, you can insert a data feed, right? That's another way of creating collections with data feeds. Now, if I click on the data feed, I can select which data feed I want to use in the properties. I'm not using my Excel file. I'm using my listing of Zoopla. And then I can edit the template. So let me use this little icon that I prepared. Okay, and I will override the template. Okay, looks like I have one image at least, which is somewhere in Africa. Why? Because by default, it's located in 0 and 0, latitude and longitude. Again, let's use the binding to retrieve the value from the web service and use it as a visual property. I can also switch to the binding mode to see all the properties which are available to me, like this. And let's pick the one we want. So we are looking for latitude. This one will go here. Click and click works. And by the way, you can already see that the pinpoints moved somewhere around UK. And I need the longitude. I can also do a drag and drop. Longitude will go in longitude. Okay, let's close this. Okay, looks like we're good now. We have a map with the same list of content, the same data feed represented around London. If I update some properties, let's go to 380 pounds as a minimum price. The map is refreshed, the list is refreshed. Right now I'm in the edit mode in Composer, changing manually a property, but you can use actions. Zoopla, you have all the set asset properties. All these properties can be set through an action using a text input, for example, to let the user types in some information. This is what you will see in the full sample, the full real estate sample available in the marketplace. So if you want to know more about this real estate sample, just download it from the marketplace. Okay, this one was easy since the web service was already available as an example. in the API Explorer. So now let's have a look at something more manual where you want to use a CMS, you want to use its API, and you want to use your own URL in the API Explorer. So in this sample, I will use what we call a headless CMS, and I will use Airtable. This is a third-party tool that we like quite a lot, right? And actually, that's not the right account. So let me sign in with the webinar account. Okay. And this is the table I want to use for this demo. Just update. Okay. So I want the demo of Airtable. It's not the purpose of the webinar, right? But basically, it's a kind of online Excel version where you can host content like images. So you create the structure you want, and you can modify the value from this CMS, this online back office, pretty easily, right? So I will use this table here to create a screensaver for a restaurant menu, right? Let's say you have some pictures and you want to cycle through the pictures with a little text as a legend. What we like about Airtable is that within their help, they provide an API documentation, which makes it very easy to use within the API Explorer. So this is the table I want to use, and I want to list the records, to retrieve all my records, right? And that's an example request. So please do not copy the key, but this is how I would do. Oops. Let's go Control-C. That's the request I need to call to retrieve the information using the web service. Now, if I go back in Composer, open the API Explorer, and just paste the requests. Let's see what we have. Okay, it looks like we have 3 records because of this max records. Let me remove this one. We don't want this parameter. So now I have my 4 records. I can browse them and look at the different pictures. And again, I can select the information that I want to use in my template. So I want the main URL. I don't care about the file name, the type. I don't care about the thumbnails. I want the full URL, but I do need to have the name displayed as, let's go with a proper noun. Okay, so these 2 properties. Let's import that. Okay, doesn't really look like a screensaver, but I do have my collection with, let me simplify this one a little bit. Okay, with a template which has a name and a picture, which is the main URL. Okay, now I'm just going to edit this template. So I will put it outside of the list, right? Let's say I want something which will be full screen like this. With the image, again, go full screen. And the text would go white and something big. Like this. Okay, now let's see, the collection will again be full screen. And instead of being an essay grid, will be a slideshow. So it cycles through the different templates. Now I can just put back my template inside. And maybe I will update some properties here. I don't want any zoom effect. So in the slideshow, I can remove the zoom. Okay. And starting at the next one, we will now see an image with the title. Okay. If I go to my database and change the content, like webinar title demo, okay, as soon as the web service is going to be called, the data will be reloaded. So of course it started here at number 2, so we have to wait a few seconds to see the number 3. I hope the animation is not too laggy with the screen sharing session. We have the number 4, and when we're going to see number 1, we will see webinar title demo. So it updated the data from the CMS. Okay. So this data is updated each time you launch Player, you launch the experience. Or if on the interface asset, you set up an automatic refresh with a specific time, for example, every 1 hour. Then every single hour, the data will be retrieved again from the CMS and will be refreshed without needing any action from you. This is how we connect a CMS to Interface or Interface to a CMS. I will recommend you to just type here in this search online documentation CMS, and you will reach this article, how to connect Interface to a content management system. That may be one of the best resources that can help you figure out the different options you have, including this method using the API Explorer. Okay, so loading external data, we've seen how to do that with a local Excel file, with a sample web service from the API Explorer, and with our own web service using this documentation from Airtable. Next scenario, we'll see the opposite, how to retrieve information from the scene and send it to an interface asset, which is basically the scenario of a guestbook. So how to create a form and retrieve user information. That's the guestbook scenario that you may want to use as a concierge application in a hotel, or maybe at a trade show to retrieve the emails of your leads. Lots of examples of situations where you would like to retrieve some information from the visitors or the interactive device users. We will have a look at two options, and I will demonstrate the two at the same time. One based on a local Excel file using an add row action, which has the advantage of being totally offline, and it works well with if you have one device on which you want to retrieve this data. And the other one using the data tracking feature that we propose. I won't go into the details of this one since we have a webinar dedicated to this feature, but I still want to introduce the feature to you since it's a pretty important one and can be a very useful one. So in both cases, to retrieve some information, we need to let the user type in some information, right? So we will need to add some text inputs. So I will add one here for the email address. Okay. And I will add another one below. And I will say I want the text to be top and line wrap. Okay. By the way, let me move this and move the group up so we have some room with the virtual keyboard down there. Okay. Pretty important as well, name the assets. So this one will be our email text input. And this one will be the comment text input. You're going to see why it's pretty helpful to name your assets, both for you when you're working on a project and maybe for your colleagues who might work on the project after you. Okay, then scenario number one, we need an Excel file. This is the one I prepared, very complex one. This is it, let me zoom on that. One row, column titles, email, comment. These are the two fields I need. And of course, at the beginning, the guestbook is empty unless you want to fill this one with fake data. Up to you. Okay, so I will import this Excel file to our interface assets. This time I won't drag and drop it on the scene, right? I don't want to display all the email addresses to my users, right? I just want to use this one to call the add row action. Okay. Scenario number two, I will use the data tracking interface asset, which is available by default in the interface assets panel. Okay. In both cases, again, the main action will come from the send button. So on this button, I will add the trigger that will do everything. Scenario number 1, we are going to use this Excel file and call the add row. And look at that, email comment. You have two parameters here because you have two columns with titles in your Excel files. If you wanted to have a first name or last name, you would have 4 column titles and you would have 4 parameters available here. And same as before, we will use the binding to make the connection between this parameter field and what has been typed in the email text input. So let's bind this parameter to, so this time it's not an interface asset, right? We are retrieving the value from the scene itself. And this is why I named my inputs. Email text input, that's the one I want to use. And I want to retrieve its text property, where the text which has been typed by the user. Okay. Same thing for the comment. I will use the comment text input and will use the text property. Okay, that's it for the scenario number 1. This will add a new row in the Excel file each time the send button is released. Scenario number 2, using the data tracking. The action is log event. The main difference is we don't have the Excel file, so we don't know the structure in advance. But you're pretty free here, so you can name the event the way you want. Let's go with actually guestbook signed. Sounds good. This is something I already used and it remembers. And I can add as many parameters as I want. So obviously I will have the email and the comment. Again, I will use the binding. So from my comment text input, use the text. Okay, and here for the email, I will grab the right source, email text input, and its text property. You see, it's very similar. This one uses an Excel file, this one uses the data tracking, and we send all the data to the data tracking hub. I will mention that in the next scene. In both scenarios, in both cases, you would probably want to navigate to the next scene, which will say thank you. So let's do this with a little crossfade. Okay, so my email address, webinar@intuilab.com. My super comment for this great webinar. Okay, I'm clicking the send button and releasing it. Thank you, thanks for signing the guestbook, that's nice. Then you would probably have a timer that would bring you back to the home screen. So in the case of the data tracking, again, I won't go into the details. I will invite you to go to our webinars list and watch the recording, if you haven't seen it already, of this deep analytics through interactivity presented by Jeff. You will learn everything you need to know about that. The main thing to understand is that all your devices in the field will send the data to the data tracking hub, which enables you to retrieve all the data in one central point. It also handles offline data tracking. So if your device is offline on a trade show, as soon as it gets back online, it will push all the stored data automatically to this hub. Regarding the Excel file, if I go back to the folder and open this Excel file, well, of course, it's empty. When I imported the file was copied within the experience. So if I right-click my file here, open file location, this is the file in which I will find my super comment and my email address. Okay. If you have multiple devices, you will have one Excel file per device and you will have to retrieve them manually on the drive of each device. So to conclude this webinar, I wanted to say that we talked about connecting an interface experience to external data. But behind the scene, we have been talking about interface assets. These things that you can reuse directly from the off-the-shelf interface assets using an Excel file, using the API Explorer, or if you want, create your own interface assets, .NET or JavaScript, which will let you create all the connections you need between interface and the outside world to add data, to import data, to export data, or just to add some business logic. Regarding Excel, I want to focus on this one since it's really one of the most powerful tools you can use in combination with Intuiface. I said it already, but I want to say it again. You can save a huge amount of time putting your data, organizing your data in an Excel file, and building your experience upon the Excel file structure and the filtering mechanisms. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I hope you learned a few things, and I hope you will try these features. If you have any question, of course, I'm going to stay connected for a few more minutes. If you have to run in another meeting, I totally understand and wish you a very good day.